In front of the cameras, Edward Vance was a hero, a successful businessman, a tireless philanthropist, and the father of a boy with a rare neurological condition. But behind the walls of the mansion in Southampton, a dark truth lay hidden beneath doses of medication and rehearsed smiles. When the only person who truly loved the boy is unfairly expelled, the silence begins to be broken by small, yet revolutionary gestures. And it is at the moment when everyone believed he would never speak, that Matthew decides to tell the world the truth no one expected to hear. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. Let's continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear. Under the glare of the spotlights, Edward Vascott was the very image of kindness. The 45-year-old businessman, owner of the largest network of private hospitals in the American South, adjusted his navy blue tie before stepping onto the stage of the Charleston Municipal Theater. His brown eyes, slightly moist, scanned the audience filled with journalists, doctors, and important figures from South Carolinian society. For the 5th time that year, he was holding a charity event in the name of the foundation he had created for his son, Matthew. "Good evening, everyone," his deep voice echoed through the microphone. "As many of you know, we are here to talk about hope, about struggle, about never giving up." He paused, a calculated move as if gathering strength. "My son Matthew was born with a rare neurological condition. Doctors in the United States said he would never speak or hear, that his cognitive development would be severely limited." In the front row, the foundation's director, Dr. Claire Meadows, nodded discreetly. Edward continued his speech, detailing how he had been researching an experimental treatment in London for years that could give the boy a chance at a normal life. Photos of Matthew, a 10-year-old boy with vacant eyes and a distant expression, filled the screen behind him. "For this, we need the Superior Court to release access to the trust fund established by my late wife's family. These are bureaucracies that prevent my son from having the chance he deserves," he added with a tired sigh. "It's not about money. It's about love." The audience gave a standing ovation. Edward was admired by all. The man who alone raised a special needs child after his wife's passing during childbirth. The man who donated millions to charities. The man who never gave up. No one knew the truth hidden behind the walls of the mansion in the Ashley Point neighborhood. Fine rain fell over Charleston that night. In the spacious second-floor bedroom of the Vascott mansion, Matthew watched the drops slide down the window. The room was impeccably decorated, filled with expensive toys that were rarely touched. In the corner, a shelf full of books that were never read. The boy remained motionless, only his large, brown eyes following the path of the drops on the glass. The door opened slowly, and the sound of soft footsteps broke the silence. "Good evening, my angel." Mrs. Yvonne's sweet voice filled the room. The 58-year-old woman, with time-marked brown skin and grey hair always tied in a bun, had been the only constant in the boy's life since he was born. "Look who's here to see you before bedtime." She held up a small, time-worn teddy bear, making it dance in the air. It was the only object Matthew showed attachment to. His eyes gained a subtle sparkle, and his thin fingers reached out for the toy. Yvonne adjusted the sheets around the boy and sat on the edge of the bed. She began to hum a southern lullaby, something she did every night, even believing he couldn't hear. For her, it didn't matter what the doctors said. She was sure that somehow Matthew understood her affection. "One day you'll talk to me, won't you?" she whispered, stroking the boy's soft black hair. "And when that day comes, I'll be the happiest person in the world." The sound of a car parking interrupted the moment. Matthew instinctively cowered under the covers, clutching the teddy bear tightly. Yvonne noticed the immediate change. "It was always like this when Edward came home. Don't be afraid, my angel. Mrs. Yvonne is here." Firm footsteps ascended the main staircase. The door opened with a sudden movement, and Edward entered the room. The warm smile he had displayed at the event had completely vanished. In its place, a cold, calculating expression. "How is he?" he asked dryly, without looking directly at his son. "Well, Dr. Vascott, he's already bathed, eaten everything properly, and is ready for bed." Edward approached the bed, analyzing his son as one would examine an object. "It's time for his medicine." Yvonne hesitated. "Doctor, can't we skip it today? He seems so tired." "Are you a doctor now, Yvonne?" Edward's sharp voice made her recoil. The medicine is essential to stabilize his condition. Or do you want him to have a seizure like last time? There was no seizure, Yvonne thought, but kept the thought to herself. In 10 years of caring for the boy, she had never witnessed anything resembling a neurological crisis. But who was she to question? A simple housekeeper from Oakwood, a rural town in South Carolina, facing one of the most powerful men in the state. Edward took a small bottle containing a dark, viscous liquid from his pocket. He carefully measured the dose into a spoon and approached Matthew. "Open your mouth, son." The boy's eyes showed a brief flicker of resistance, but soon gave in. He swallowed the bitter liquid, grimacing. "Excellent. Now make sure he sleeps. I have an important video conference with London in half an hour." Edward left the room without looking back. Yvonne watched as, in minutes, Matthew's eyes began to grow heavy, his expression more distant than usual. It was as if a curtain slowly descended, extinguishing any spark of life in that childlike gaze. She caressed the boy's face as a silent tear rolled down her wrinkled cheek. Something was wrong in that house, something she couldn't name but felt in every cell of her body, a dark secret hidden behind the perfect facade of the Vascott family. "One day I'll understand what's happening here, my angel," she whispered, as Matthew plunged into a deep sleep. "And when that day comes, I promise I'll protect you no matter the cost." Outside, the rain intensified, lashing the rooftops of the South Carolina capital. And inside that silent mansion, two lonely souls, one imprisoned by forced silence, the other by helplessness, awaited an awakening that seemed impossible. In the downstairs office, Edward discussed on the phone, his voice a calculated murmur. "The documents are ready. Yes, the hearing is scheduled for next month. When the money is released, we can finally put the plan into action." The morning dawned clear in Charleston. The first rays of sun filtered through the blinds, drawing golden lines on the wooden floor of Matthew's room. Mrs. Yvonne entered silently, carrying a tray with oatmeal and orange juice. She smiled when she saw that the boy was already awake, sitting in bed watching the movement of dust particles dancing in the light. "Good morning, my prince. It's a beautiful day outside. How about we have breakfast on the balcony today?" Matthew didn't answer, he never did, but his eyes lit up subtly at the sight of the woman. Yvonne knew every nuance of that gaze. For her, the boy's eyes spoke more than many mouths out there. Carefully, she helped him get dressed. A routine she knew like the back of her hand, after 10 years dedicated to that child. She chose a blue cotton shirt and light shorts. To match the day, she explained, even without knowing if she was understood. While arranging the boy's black hair, Yvonne hummed an old song from her homeland. It spoke of little birds flying free in the sky, of rivers running fearlessly to the sea. Matthew gazed at her intensely, as if trying to absorb every word. "Dr. Vascott left very early today. Said he wouldn't be back until night," she commented, adjusting the laces of the boy's sneakers. "Do you know what that means? We have the whole day just for us." On the balcony overlooking the mansion's internal garden, Yvonne settled Matthew in a comfortable chair. The oatmeal was at the perfect temperature. Patiently, she gave small spoonfuls to the boy, who accepted the food without resistance. Between spoonfuls, she continued her unilateral conversation, telling stories of her childhood in the countryside, of how the sky there was different, more starry, more vast. "One day I'll take you to Oakwood," she promised. "They have the biggest rural carnival there, did you know? The Maracatu Rural, the Papangas with their colorful masks. You'd love it." For an instant, she seemed to see a different sparkle in the boy's eyes, almost as if he was trying to imagine that distant place. But perhaps it was just the reflection of the sun in the tears that gathered in the corners of her own eyes. After breakfast, Yvonne took Matthew to the garden. The Vascott mansion was surrounded by high walls, isolating them from the outside world. The internal garden, however, was a small paradise. Mango trees laden with fruit, jasmine perfuming the air, a small fountain in the center where colorful fish swam peacefully. She settled the boy under the shade of a leafy mango tree. From her bag, she took out some colorful wooden blocks she had secretly bought at the craft fair. Dr. Vascott didn't approve of simple toys like those, preferring expensive tablets and electronic games that Matthew never showed interest in. "Shall we play a bit? Look, we can build a castle." She began to stack the blocks, showing the boy how to do it. To her surprise, Matthew leaned forward and with hesitant movements picked up one of the blocks. His small hands trembled slightly as he tried to position it on top of the construction. The block fell. Once, twice, 3 times, but on the 4th attempt, he managed to balance it. A nearly imperceptible smile appeared on his lips. Yvonne felt her heart tighten. Those small moments were rare and precious. They contradicted everything Dr. Vascott said about his son's condition. How could a boy supposedly incapable of learning coordinate such precise movements? How could he show joy if he didn't understand the world around him? "You are much more than they say. Aren't you, my angel?" she whispered, holding the boy's small hands in hers. She spent the entire afternoon like that, playing, showing plants, telling stories. For a few hours, the oppressive silence of the mansion was replaced by the gentle melody of Yvonne's voice and the occasional rustling of the mango tree leaves. When the sun began to set, Yvonne checked her watch. It was almost time for Matthew's medicine. Dr. Vascott had called earlier, reminding her not to forget the medication even in his absence. "Let's go inside, my prince. It's getting chilly out here." Back in the room, Yvonne helped Matthew prepare for his bath. That's when she noticed something different, a small purplish bruise on the boy's arm near his shoulder. Her heart raced. It wasn't the first time she had found inexplicable marks on the child's body. "Who did this to you, my angel?" she asked, gently running her fingers over the mark. Matthew looked away, as he always did when something bothered him. Yvonne felt a lump in her throat. There were so many unanswered questions in that house. So many secrets. After the bath, she dressed Matthew in soft pajamas and settled him in bed. On the nightstand, the medicine bottle awaited. Yvonne examined it against the light, observing the dark, viscous liquid. What substance could it be that made the boy so lethargic after ingesting it? "You know what?" she said, making a sudden decision. "I think we can skip the medicine today. Dr. Vascott won't be back until late, and you seem so well." She put the bottle in the drawer and sat beside Matthew. She picked up a storybook from the shelf, a gift she had given the boy for his last birthday and which, as far as she knew, had never been opened. "Once upon a time, in a distant kingdom," she began, showing the colorful illustrations. To her surprise, Matthew leaned closer, his eyes fixed on the images. For almost an hour Yvonne read, gesturing, changing voices for each character, and for the first time she had the impression that the boy was truly listening to her, that he understood the story. When she finished reading, Matthew's eyes were already heavy with natural sleep, not the induced stupor of the mysterious medication. Yvonne covered him with affection and handed him the old teddy bear. "Good night, my prince. Dream of angels." She was about to leave when a noise at the front door alerted her. Edward had returned earlier than expected. In a panic, Yvonne rushed to the drawer, grabbed the bottle, and hastily measured a dose smaller than usual. "Matthew, dear, I need you to take this quickly," she whispered urgently. The boy, already almost asleep, parted his lips and accepted the medication. Yvonne wiped a drop that had trickled from the corner of his mouth. Just as the bedroom door opened, Edward Vascott entered, his face stern, examining the scene with suspicious eyes. "Is everything all right here?" "Yes, doctor," Yvonne replied, trying to control the tremor in her voice. "I just gave him his medicine. He was almost asleep already." Edward approached the bed, observing his son intently. Matthew kept his eyes closed, his breathing regular. "Why did it take so long today?" "You know the timing of the medication is crucial." "I'm sorry, doctor. We were reading a story and I lost track of time." Edward raised an eyebrow. "Reading? Yvonne, you know very well that Matthew doesn't understand stories. Don't foster false hopes." His voice was icy. "And don't forget your place in this house. You are hired to care for him following my precise instructions, not to decide what's best for my son." Yvonne lowered her gaze, feeling the weight of those words like a blow. "It won't happen again, doctor." "Good. Now you may leave. Tomorrow I want Matthew ready early. We'll have an important visit from Dr. Meadows." When Yvonne left, Edward sat on the edge of the bed watching his sleeping son. His fingers drummed nervously on his knee. "Everything is going according to plan," he murmured to himself. "Just a few more weeks and everything will be resolved." In the hallway, Yvonne leaned against the wall, her heart heavy. Something was very wrong in that house, and she was beginning to suspect that Matthew wasn't the only prisoner there. Somehow everyone was entangled in the web of lies woven by Edward Vascott. The Monroe County Courthouse in downtown Charleston was unusually busy that Thursday morning. Journalists crowded the main entrance, cameras at the ready, awaiting the arrival of Edward Vascott. The hearing for the release of his late wife's family trust fund had become a media event, thanks to the businessman's public relations department, which had turned the case into a crusade for the health of a special needs child. Edward stepped out of his armored BMW, immediately surrounded by microphones and flashes. He wore an impeccable suit, but his face displayed a carefully studied expression of genuine fatigue. Beside him, Dr. Claire Meadows, director of the foundation named after Matthew, held a folder full of documents. "Dr. Vascott, are you confident in today's decision? Does the treatment in London already have a start date? First, is there a real possibility of recovery for your son?" Questions came from all sides. Edward responded with the same narrative carefully constructed over the years: a father's tireless struggle, bureaucratic barriers, unwavering hope. "We are here today for Matthew," he declared to the cameras. "For all children who, like him, deserve a chance to live fully. The money in this fund was left by my wife specifically to ensure our son's well-being. It is unacceptable that, after almost a decade of legal battle, we still encounter resistance to use it for the only treatment that can make a difference in his life." His performance was convincing. In the back of the crowd, however, keen eyes watched him with suspicion. Rachel Cavendish, a district attorney known for her unwavering integrity, made mental notes of every word, every gesture of the businessman. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was more subdued. Judge Arthur Monroe, a middle-aged man known for his rigorous impartiality, presided over the session. Representatives from the bank responsible for the fund and the Child Protective Services were also present. The hearing followed its predictable course until Edward made an announcement that surprised everyone. "Your Honor, I have in hand a detailed medical report, signed by the most respected neurologists in London, confirming not only the viability of the treatment, but also its urgency. This document is the final proof that we need to act immediately." The judge extended his hand, waiting for the document to be delivered. That's when Edward paled. I apologize, Your Honor," he stammered, frantically checking his folder. "The document was here this morning. I'm absolutely certain." A murmur filled the room. Edward consulted Dr. Meadows, who also seemed confused. Judge Monroe, showing visible dissatisfaction, adjusted his glasses. "Dr. Vascott, this is not the first time crucial documents for this process have mysteriously disappeared. We have been here for almost a decade, and every time we get close to a resolution, new complications arise." "Your Honor, I request a brief recess," Edward's lawyer intervened. "Perhaps the document was left in the car or—" Recess granted. 15 minutes. As everyone withdrew, Edward rushed to the hallway, furiously typing on his cell phone. His face, previously composed for the cameras, now revealed barely contained fury. In the Vascott mansion, Mrs. Yvonne was tidying Matthew's room when her cell phone rang. It was Edward's third call in less than 10 minutes. With a pounding heart, she finally answered. "Where is the document, Yvonne?" The voice on the other end was sharp as a blade. "Document, doctor? I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play innocent. The medical report from London, which was in my folder. I saw it in my office last night, and now it's gone. You were the only person who went in there to clean this morning." Yvonne felt her legs weaken. "Doctor, I swear I didn't take anything from your office. I just dusted, as I always do." "You're lying." "I've always been suspicious of your excessive curiosity. The questions you ask about Matthew. The times I caught you rummaging through drawers. No, doctor, I would never—" "Listen carefully. Yvonne," Edward's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper, "you have exactly 1 hour to find that document and confess where you hid it. Otherwise, you will face the consequences. Do you understand?" The call ended, leaving Yvonne paralyzed, the phone still in her hand. Tears began to stream down her wrinkled face. In 10 years of service, she had never been accused of something so serious. Recovering from the initial shock, Yvonne ran to Matthew's room. The boy was sitting on the rug, with some building blocks scattered around him. Seeing her enter in a state of agitation, he looked up, a shadow of concern crossing his usually impassive face. "Matthew, my angel, did you see any paper of your father's? An important document?" The boy remained motionless, but his eyes briefly shifted to the teddy bear sitting on the bed. Yvonne, too desperate to notice the gesture, began to search the room, opening drawers, looking under the bed. "Oh my God, what are we going to do? Your father will blame me for this, and I don't know where that document is." The sound of the doorbell interrupted her despair. Quickly drying her tears with her hands, Yvonne went downstairs. Opening the door, she found herself facing two police officers and the imposing figure of Edward Vascott. "It's her," Edward pointed, without looking her in the eyes. "Confiscate her phone and check her belongings." "What's happening?" Yvonne asked, her voice trembling. "Mrs. Yvonne Silva, you are being accused of aggravated theft," one of the officers explained, showing a warrant. "We have authorization to search your belongings, but I didn't steal anything. Dr. Vascott, you've known me for 10 years. How can you believe I would—" "I found you going through my documents several times," Edward cut her off, "for the benefit of the police. I always overlooked it, believing in your loyalty. But this document was crucial for my son's treatment. You knew that." "Please," Yvonne pleaded, as the police began to search her small room in the back of the mansion. "I dedicated my life to caring for Matthew. I would never do anything to harm him." Edward remained impassive. His cell phone rang, and he stepped away to answer. It was Dr. Meadows, informing him that the judge had rescheduled the hearing for next week, expressing his dissatisfaction with the situation. When the police finished their search without finding anything, Edward made a decision. "I don't want her to remain in this house for another minute," he declared. "I am formally pressing charges. I have security cameras in the office. I will check the recordings. Meanwhile, I want a restraining order. She is not to approach my family." Yvonne fell to her knees, sobbing. "Please don't keep me away from Matthew. He needs me. Who will care for him? Who will understand what he wants without words?" "I've already hired a specialized nurse," Edward replied coldly. "Someone with real qualifications, not just a housekeeper with delusions of grandeur." The cruelty of the words hit Yvonne like a physical blow. The police, visibly uncomfortable, helped her up. "Ma'am, you'll need to accompany us to give a statement," one of them informed her, in a gentler voice. "You have the right to an attorney." "I don't have money for a lawyer," Yvonne murmured. Defeated. "The state will provide a public defender." As she was led out, Yvonne looked up at the second-floor window. There was Matthew. His little face pressed against the glass, the teddy bear clutched to his chest. For a moment, it seemed to Yvonne that there were tears in the boy's eyes, something she had never witnessed before. "I'll be back. My angel," she whispered, knowing he couldn't hear her from that distance. "I promise I'll come back for you." At the police station, Yvonne spent hours repeating the same story. She hadn't stolen any document. She didn't know what it was about. She would never do anything to harm Matthew. Her statement was recorded and she was released, but with a restraining order prohibiting her from approaching the Vascott mansion or contacting any family member. When she left the police station, it was already night. With nowhere to go in the South Carolina capital, Yvonne sought shelter in the small St. Joseph's Church in the historic district. Sitting in the back pew, she let the tears flow freely as she prayed. "My God, protect that boy. Something is very wrong in that house. I feel it." Back at the mansion, Edward checked the security cameras in the office. To his frustration, there was no record of Yvonne taking any document. In fact, the recordings only showed her cleaning, as she had stated. Irritated, he turned off the monitor. In the bedroom, Matthew remained awake, refusing to sleep despite the new nurse's efforts. His eyes fixed on the door, as if waiting for Mrs. Yvonne to enter at any moment with her warm smile and comforting stories. Under his pillow, carefully hidden, was the teddy bear. And inside it, accessible only through a small tear in the back seam, was the document that could change everything. 3 days had passed since Mrs. Yvonne was removed from the Vascott mansion. For Matthew, it felt like an eternity. The new nurse, Sandra, was efficient and professional, but her gestures lacked the warmth and tenderness he was accustomed to. She didn't sing when she got him ready in the morning, didn't tell stories before bed, didn't know the small details that made his world less lonely. That night, lying in his bed, Matthew clutched the teddy bear to his chest. Yvonne's absence created a void that seemed to swallow him. For the first time, he felt truly alone, even though he was used to silence. His father rarely appeared, busy with interviews and meetings about the postponed hearing. When he came to the room, it was only to check if the medication had been administered correctly. "It's time for your medicine, Matthew," Sandra announced, entering the room with a glass of water and the bottle of dark liquid. The boy watched the substance being carefully measured. He knew this ritual well. After taking it, the familiar stupor would come, the sensation of sinking into murky waters, losing control over his thoughts, over his body. "Come on, open your mouth," Sandra instructed, bringing the spoon closer. Matthew obeyed automatically. The bitter liquid slid down his throat, or almost. With an imperceptible movement, he retained part of the medication under his tongue. When the nurse turned to put away the bottle, he discreetly spit the medicine into a tissue, which he hid under his pillow. It wasn't the first time he had done this. Since he saw Yvonne being taken away, something had awakened in him, a determination he didn't know he possessed. In recent nights, he had pretended to swallow the medicine but secretly discarded it. The result was revealing. Instead of the usual stupor, he remained alert, his mind gradually clearing like a landscape after the fog dissipated. "Good night," Sandra said, turning off the main light and leaving only the bedside lamp on. "If you need anything, press the button next to the bed." The door closed. Matthew waited a few minutes, making sure the nurse wouldn't return. Then, moving cautiously, he got out of bed. His legs trembled a little. He wasn't used to moving so much when everyone thought he was asleep. He went to the window, looking at the starry Charleston night. Somewhere in the city, would Mrs. Yvonne also be looking at the same sky? A noise in the hallway alerted him. Quickly he returned to bed and closed his eyes, forcing his breathing to become slower and more regular. The door opened and he recognized his father's footsteps. "How is he?" Edward asked the nurse who accompanied him. "He fell asleep right after taking the medication, as you said he would." Edward approached the bed, observing his son. Matthew kept his eyes closed, his body still as he had done countless times. "Dr. Meadows will come tomorrow for the monthly evaluation. Prepare him properly. I want him to be in his usual condition." "Yes, sir. Should I increase the dosage?" There was a pause. Matthew could feel his father's gaze on him, evaluating, calculating. "No, keep it as it is. Just make sure he takes everything correctly." That intrusive old woman sometimes lowered the dose on her own. "I noticed he was more reactive in recent weeks." "I understand. Don't worry, I'm a professional." The footsteps moved away, the door closed. Matthew waited a few more minutes before opening his eyes. His heart was pounding. "Usual condition? More reactive?" His father's words echoed in his confused mind. Slowly he began to piece together the puzzle. Why did his father want him to remain sedated? Why had Yvonne, who had always shown so much love, been suddenly removed? And why the accusation about a document he had never seen? The document! Matthew sat up in bed, remembering. The day Yvonne was taken away, he had witnessed something strange. In the morning, as his father prepared to leave, he had seen him drop a paper from his pocket in the hallway. Moved by curiosity and the rare opportunity to be momentarily unsupervised, Matthew had picked up the document and hidden it inside his teddy bear through a small tear in the seam. Now, with his mind clearer than it had ever been, he took the bear from under the pillow. With trembling fingers, he found the opening and extracted the folded paper. It was a report, full of medical terms he didn't fully understand. But something caught his attention. His name appeared several times, along with words like treatment, continuous administration, and side effects. He continued examining it, trying to decipher the technical language. One phrase, however, stood out with terrifying clarity. No evidence of any congenital neurological condition was found in patient Matthew Vascott. The shock was so intense that he almost dropped the paper. If he had no neurological condition, why had he spent his entire life being treated as if he did? Why did he take that medicine that made him lethargic and confused? With his heart pounding in his chest, he continued reading. The document was, in fact, a medical report, but not from London. It was from Charleston University Hospital, dated 3 years ago. Apparently, his father had requested a complete, confidential neurological evaluation, performed while Matthew was under the effect of sedatives, believing he was having routine exams. The results were unequivocal. There was nothing wrong with his brain. He was a neurologically typical child, who showed signs of chronic sedation and severe social isolation. Matthew let the paper fall onto the bed, suddenly feeling dizzy. Had his whole life been an elaborate lie? His own father deliberately keeping him sedated, isolated from the world, unable to develop basic communication skills? But why? What would be the purpose of such calculated cruelty? The sound of voices coming from the downstairs office interrupted his thoughts. Driven by an impulse, Matthew put the document back in the bear and silently opened the bedroom door. The hallway was dark, except for the light escaping from under his father's office door. Barefoot, he crept closer, bending down to listen to the conversation. "The judge is getting impatient, Edward." It was Dr. Meadows' voice. "He wants to see that report at the next hearing, or he threatens to dismiss the case. 10 years is too long to release a simple trust fund." "It's not a simple trust fund, and you know that." His father's voice sounded irritated. "We're talking about almost $200 million. If we can get access, we can finally get that money out of the country through the clinics in London. It's the perfect plan." "As long as no one finds out there's no treatment at all," a third voice, which Matthew didn't recognize, commented. "Or that your son has no condition whatsoever." "No one will find out," Edward stated confidently. "Matthew never spoke, never will. The medication ensures that, and that intrusive housekeeper is out of the way. Now we just need to forge a new report to present to the court. What if someone gets suspicious? What if they ask for a new independent examination?" "They won't ask. I have trusted doctors who will confirm anything I say. Besides, who would question a dedicated father who sacrifices everything for his sick son? It's the perfect story." Matthew felt his legs weaken. He silently retreated, returning to his room. He closed the door without making a sound and slid to the floor, his back against the wall. Silent tears streamed down his face as the devastating truth settled in his mind. It was all a lie. His supposed illness, the treatment in London, the loving, dedicated father, all fabricated to access money that didn't belong to Edward, probably the inheritance left by his mother, whom he had never known. That night, Matthew didn't sleep. For the first time in his short life, he felt something beyond fear and confusion. Rage. A silent but powerful rage that grew with each passing moment. Along with it came determination. He needed to find Mrs. Yvonne. He needed to show her the document. He needed to finally break the silence that had been imposed on him. The next morning, when Sandra brought his coffee and medicine, Matthew followed the same strategy. He pretended to swallow, but hid the liquid. Throughout the day, he continued. His usual performance, the vacant stare, the slow movements, the apparent indifference to the world around him. But inside, his mind worked frantically. During the evaluation with Dr. Meadows, he remained impassive as she performed the usual procedures, checking his reactions to stimuli, measuring his vital signs, making notes on a clipboard. At no point did she perform any real neurological examination. "He's stable," she finally declared to Edward. "We will continue with the same protocol until we can access the fund for definitive treatment." When they left the room, Matthew picked up the small toy recorder that Yvonne had given him years ago, a gift his father had considered useless for a child like him. He tested the device, checking that it still worked with the old batteries. Then silently he went to the hallway and positioned the recorder near the office door, where his father and the doctor continued their conversation. He returned to the room, waiting for the right moment. Hours later, when everyone was asleep, he retrieved the recorder. With trembling hands, he pressed the play button and brought the device to his ear. The voices were low, but perfectly audible. They talked about bank transfers, about how they would justify the use of the money once the court released it, about keeping the boy under control indefinitely. Matthew felt a tear roll down his face. He wasn't just a prisoner. He was a tool, a means to a cruel end. But now, with his mind clearer each day without the medication, he had a chance to change everything. He hid the recorder and the document in a space under a loose floorboard, which he had discovered years ago and where he kept small treasures, discreet gifts from Mrs. Yvonne, leaves he collected from the garden, drawings he made when no one was looking. He looked out the window at the illuminated city below. Somewhere Mrs. Yvonne was waiting, and he, finally, would find his voice to call for her. The Charleston public market, one of the oldest in the city, buzzed with activity that Saturday morning. Under the 19th century cast-iron structures, vendors loudly advertised their products, while shoppers circulated among the colorful stalls. The aroma of herbs, tropical fruits, and spices filled the warm, humid air of the South Carolina capital. Yvonne walked with her head down among the stalls, carrying a small shopping bag. After the incident at the Vascott mansion, she had found temporary shelter at the home of her cousin Janine, a medicinal herb seller who had a small space in the market. In exchange for lodging, she helped her cousin with the business, trying to rebuild her life while awaiting the resolution of the unjust lawsuit Edward had filed against her. "Slow down, girl," exclaimed Janine, a robust woman with an easy smile and a colorful turban. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." Yvonne forced a smile. "Sorry, Janine, I just can't stop thinking about Matthew. Who's taking care of him? Is he taking his medicine at the right times? Do they remember to give him his teddy bear at bedtime?" "You need to worry about yourself now," Janine advised, arranging some boldo leaves on her stall. "That rich man accused you of theft, remember? If you don't clear your name, you won't be able to help anyone, much less the boy." "I know, but—" Yvonne stopped suddenly, her eyes fixed on a point beyond the stall. On the other side of the aisle, an elegant woman was talking to a fruit vendor. Tall, hair perfectly arranged in a bun, expensive framed glasses. Yvonne recognized her immediately. It was Sandra, the nurse who had replaced her at the Vascott mansion, and holding her hand firmly was Matthew. Yvonne's heart raced. The boy looked different, paler, thinner, his eyes even emptier than usual. He wore impeccable clothes, but his expression conveyed a deep sadness that broke the old caregiver's heart. "It's him, Janine," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's Matthew. The businessman's boy. Better stay away. You have a court order, remember." But Yvonne couldn't take her eyes off him. A force greater than fear propelled her towards the boy. The restraining order prohibited her from seeking him out, but there they were by chance in the same place. Was it fate? "I just want to see how he is. From afar. I won't approach." Keeping herself partially hidden behind a column, Yvonne watched as the nurse chose some fruits, chatting animatedly with the vendor. Matthew remained motionless beside her, seemingly oblivious to everything, exactly as everyone expected him to behave. Suddenly, as if feeling the gaze upon him, the boy turned his head. His eyes met Yvonne's. For a fleeting moment, something incredible happened. Matthew's lips curved into a small smile, a gesture so subtle that any casual observer would have missed it. But not Yvonne. She knew every nuance of that beloved face, and that smile, however small, was the first she had seen in 10 years. With a racing heart, she watched Matthew discreetly look at the nurse, making sure she was distracted. Then, with deliberate movements, not the uncoordinated gestures everyone expected from him, the boy opened his hand, revealing a small folded paper. He let it fall to the ground, and with a movement of his foot pushed it in Yvonne's direction. The message was clear. He wanted her to pick up the paper. Without thinking twice, Yvonne murmured an excuse to Janine and moved through the aisle, pretending to examine merchandise as she approached where the paper had fallen. She crouched down, pretending to tie her shoelace, and with a quick movement picked up the small note, hiding it in the palm of her hand. When she stood up, she saw that the nurse had finished her shopping and was walking away, pulling Matthew by the hand. The boy cast one last glance at Yvonne, a look full of meaning, before disappearing into the crowd. With trembling hands, Yvonne unfolded the paper as soon as she returned to Janine's stall. The message, written in childish, shaky letters, consisted of only 4 words. St. Joseph's Church, Sunday. Yvonne felt the world spin around her. Matthew knew how to write. Matthew had planned this meeting. Matthew, the boy everyone believed incapable of communicating, was sending a deliberate message. "What is that?" Janine asked, curious. "A chance to discover the truth," Yvonne replied, carefully putting the note in her dress pocket. Sunday dawned rainy in Charleston, the sky covered with heavy clouds that discharged a fine, persistent drizzle over the city. St. Joseph's Church, An 18th-century historic building stood imposing in the old centre, its baroque towers defying the grey sky. Yvonne arrived early for the 10 o'clock mass, choosing a discreet spot in the back of the nave. Her body was there, kneeling on the wooden pew, but her mind wandered restlessly. How would Matthew manage to come? Would it be a trap by Edward? To incriminate her for violating the court order? And if it was real, what did it mean that the boy could write, plan a meeting? The church gradually filled. Families, elderly people, young people, the local community gathered for the Sunday ritual. Yvonne examined every face that entered, her heart leaping at every child she saw. Mass began, and no sign of Matthew. Disappointment was starting to set in when, during the offertory, a movement at the entrance caught her attention. It was Mrs. Connie, the former Vascott mansion cook, who had retired 2 years earlier, and holding her hand was Matthew. The boy wore simple clothes, different from his usual expensive attire. His eyes scanned the church until they met Yvonne's. With an almost imperceptible nod, Mrs. Connie led Matthew down the side aisles, avoiding curious glances until they reached the pew where Yvonne was. Sitting. "He sought me out, Yvonne," Mrs. Connie whispered, sitting beside her. "He called my house, talking. He said he needed to see me urgently." "Talking?" Yvonne repeated, stunned, looking at the boy who now sat between them. "I don't have much time," Matthew said in a low voice, surprising Yvonne with the clarity of his speech, though his tone indicated a lack of practice. "Mrs. Sandra thinks I'm in the garden with the gardener. They'll soon realize I'm gone." Yvonne couldn't hold back her tears. She took the boy's hands in hers, noticing how cold and trembling they were. "How all this time?" "I stopped taking the medicine," Matthew explained, the words coming out with effort but determination. "After you left." I pretended to swallow, but I spit it out secretly. "In a few days I started to hear better, to think more clearly." "You could always hear. You always understood what we were saying." "I don't know. At first everything was confused, like a strange dream. The medicine made me like that. But I always understood you, Mrs. Yvonne. Your voice was the only thing that made sense." Emotion made it difficult to continue the conversation. Mrs. Connie, realizing the gravity of the situation, remained alert, watching the church entrances. "Matthew, why would your father do this? Why keep you? Like this?" The boy took a deep breath, his 10-year-old eyes carrying the weight of an understanding far beyond his age. "It's because of my mom's money." I heard him talking in the office. "A trust fund? Fiduciary?" "Fiduciary," Yvonne corrected gently. "That's it. Money my mom left for me. My dad can't use it until I need it for treatment. That's why he invented that I'm sick." The perversity of the plan sickened Yvonne. To create such an elaborate farce, to use his own son as an instrument of fraud, to steal his childhood, his education, the most basic experiences of life. "We have to report this, Matthew. We have to tell the authorities." I brought proof. The boy took a small package wrapped in paper from inside his shirt. "The document my father said you stole. A medical report that says I'm normal. And recordings I made of him talking about the plan with Dr. Meadows." Yvonne took the package with trembling hands. "How are we going to do this? Your father is a powerful man. He has influence, money. We have to find someone we can trust," Mrs. Connie intervened. "Someone who can't be bought." "My niece," Yvonne said suddenly. "Teresa works at Charleston University Hospital. She's a social worker. She'll know what to do, who to look for." Matthew nodded, but his expression suddenly changed to one of alarm. Through the side door of the church, one of the Vascott mansion's security guards entered, looking in all directions. "They found me," he whispered, shrinking into the pew. "Go with Mrs. Connie through the back exit," Yvonne instructed quickly. "I'll distract him. We'll meet at the hospital tomorrow at lunchtime." "I don't want to go back there," Matthew said, clinging to Yvonne's arm. "I don't want that medicine anymore. I know, my angel. And I promise you won't go back. But we need to do this right. If you run away now, your father will say we kidnapped you. We need the authorities on our side." Reluctantly, the boy agreed. Mrs. Connie discreetly led him through the side door, while Yvonne remained in the pew, pretending to pray fervently. The security guard passed her without recognizing her, continuing his search through the church. When she was sure Matthew and Connie had safely left, Yvonne exited the temple, the precious package of evidence secure in her bag. That same night, in her small room at Janine's house, Yvonne meticulously examined the contents of the package. The medical report was clear. Matthew showed no signs of any congenital neurological condition. The recordings, made with a small toy device, contained incriminating conversations between Edward and his accomplices, openly discussing the scheme to access the trust fund. "My God," Janine murmured, listening to the recordings beside her cousin. "How can someone do that to their own child?" "Greed," Yvonne replied simply, her voice heavy with sadness. "But this ends tomorrow." She called her niece Teresa, explaining the situation in general terms. The young social worker, known for her integrity, promised to arrange a meeting with District Attorney Rachel Cavendish, who was already investigating Edward for other irregularities. With the evidence secure and a plan forming, Yvonne finally allowed herself a moment of hope. For the first time in weeks, she slept soundly, dreaming of the day Matthew could live a normal life, free from the shadows that imprisoned him. In the hospital room, improvised as an office, Teresa analyzed the documents, District Attorney Rachel beside her. The grave expressions of both reflected the seriousness of what they were discovering. "This is much bigger than we imagined," Rachel said. "It's not just financial fraud. It's a case of systematic child abuse, falsified medical documentation, possible corruption of healthcare professionals. What can we do?" Yvonne asked, squeezing Matthew's hand, who remained seated beside her, trying to appear brave despite the evident fear in his eyes. "First, we need to protect Matthew," Teresa stated. "I'll request an emergency protective order. He cannot go back to that house. Meanwhile," Rachel continued, "I'll prepare a search and seizure warrant for the mansion. We need the bottles of this supposed medication for toxicology analysis." "What about the hearing?" Yvonne asked. "For the fund release?" "It will be on Wednesday," the district attorney informed her. "And we'll be there with all this evidence. Edward Vascott doesn't know what awaits him." Wednesday dawned under a clear sky in Charleston, the rising sun casting golden reflections on the Ashley River. In the Vascott mansion, however, chaos reigned. Edward paced back and forth in his office, his face contorted in a mask of fury and worry. Beside him, Dr. Claire Meadows and lawyer Dr. Louise Middleton watched his loss of control with growing apprehension. 3 days, Edward thundered, slamming his fist on the mahogany desk. 3 days with no news of him. How is it possible that no one can find a 10-year-old child who supposedly doesn't speak, doesn't hear, and can barely move on his own? "Calm down, Edward," Dr. Meadows tried, nervously adjusting her glasses. "We've already activated all our contacts. Hospitals, shelters, the police are discreetly searching." "Discreetly," he interrupted with a bitter laugh. "And how do we explain to the judge in—" he checked his watch. 2 hours that my son, the reason for this entire legal battle, simply disappeared?" The lawyer cleared her throat, attracting the attention of both. "I thought of something. We can claim that Matthew had a crisis and is hospitalized in serious condition. That would justify his absence and could even sway the judge towards a favorable decision." Edward stopped his frantic pacing, considering the idea. "It might work," he murmured, his calculating mind already evaluating the details. "Claire, you arrange a false medical report. Say he needed to be sedated, that he's under observation." The phone rang, interrupting the planning. Edward answered impatiently, but his expression quickly transformed into a mask of horror. "What? When? Who authorized this?" His face paled with each second. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. Don't let anyone touch anything." Hanging up abruptly, he faced the 2 women, panic evident in his voice. "The police are at the clinic with a search and seizure warrant. They're confiscating all records, computers, medication samples." "My God," Dr. Meadows murmured, dropping into an armchair. "How did they find out?" "I don't know, but we need to go now. Louise, call all our contacts at the court. We need to try to postpone this hearing at all costs." At the Monroe County Courthouse, an unusual movement caught the attention of staff and lawyers circulating through the corridors. Journalists gathered at the entrance to the room where the Vascott case hearing would take place, which had gained notoriety over the years. This time, however, something seemed different. Rumors of a twist circulated in whispers. In the room reserved for witnesses, Yvonne adjusted the bow tie on Matthew's small navy blue suit. The boy was nervous, his fingers tapping incessantly on his knee. Beside him, District Attorney Rachel Cavendish reviewed her notes, occasionally casting comforting glances towards the child. "It's okay to be scared," Yvonne said, gently caressing the boy's face. "Anyone would be scared. But remember, you're not alone anymore. We're all here with you." "What if he takes me back?" Matthew asked, his voice trembling. "What if no one believes me?" "That won't happen," Rachel affirmed with conviction. "We have proof, Matthew. We have the original medical report, the recordings, and yesterday we got the preliminary analyses of the samples collected at the mansion. What your father called medicine is a combination of potent sedatives, absolutely contraindicated for children. No judge in the world would allow you to return to that environment." A soft knock on the door announced Teresa's arrival, the social worker. She entered accompanied by a tall, middle-aged man with a serene expression and compassionate eyes. "This is Dr. Marcus Alcott," Teresa introduced. "The doctor who examined Matthew yesterday." The doctor approached, bending down to be at the boy's height. "How are you feeling today, Matthew?" "Nervous," the boy admitted. "And a little dizzy still." "Is that normal?" "Completely normal," Dr. Alcott assured him. "Your body is adjusting to the absence of those substances. It's like waking up from a very, very long sleep. It will take time until you feel completely yourself, but each day will be better than the last." A bailiff appeared at the door. "The hearing will begin in 10 minutes. Judge Monroe requests all parties to be present." Rachel gathered her documents. "It's time. Remember what we agreed. Matthew will stay in the adjoining room until he's called. We don't want Edward to see him before the right moment." "Everything will be fine, my angel," Yvonne whispered, hugging the boy tightly. "Today is the day your voice will finally be heard." The courtroom was packed. In the front rows, reporters and photographers waited anxiously, their cameras at the ready. Edward Vascott entered accompanied by his lawyer, both with tense expressions. His eyes quickly scanned the room, noticing with alarm the presence of police officers on the sides of the room and the absence of his son. When everyone was seated, the bailiff announced the entry of Judge Arthur Monroe. The magistrate took his place and observed the room seriously before beginning the proceedings. "We are gathered for the continuation of Case 2436-2015 regarding the release of the trust fund established in the name of Matthew Vascott by the late Mrs. Helen Vascott. Before we proceed, I have a few observations to make." Edward leaned forward, the tension visible in his posture. "A series of documents and evidence has been presented to this court that raise serious concerns about the true purpose of this process. The prosecution has requested the floor to present this evidence." "District Attorney Rachel Cavendish, please." Rachel rose with dignity, her folders methodically organized on the table. "Your Honor, this court has been deceived for almost a decade. What began as an apparently simple process of releasing funds for medical treatment has revealed itself to be an elaborate fraud, perpetrated by Mr. Edward Vascott against his own son, against the justice system, and against society as a whole." A murmur filled the room. Edward stood up abruptly. "Objection, Your Honor. These are serious and unfounded accusations." "Sit down, Mr. Vascott," the judge ordered. "The prosecution has the right to present its allegations. Your defense will have an opportunity to respond." Rachel continued, relentless. "We have documented proof that Matthew Vascott never suffered from any congenital neurological condition, as alleged by his father. In fact, the boy was deliberately sedated from early childhood, prevented from developing communicative skills, kept in social isolation, all as part of a plan to access the trust fund left by his mother. She presented the medical report found by Matthew, the toxicological analyses of the samples collected at the mansion, and testimonies from healthcare professionals who had examined the boy in recent days. But in addition to the documentary evidence, Your Honor, we have something even more compelling, the testimony of Matthew Vascott himself." Edward visibly paled. "This is absurd. My son doesn't speak. He cannot testify." "About that, Mr. Vascott," the judge intervened severely, "we have very different information." Rachel signaled to the bailiff, who opened a side door. Through it, Matthew entered, hand in hand with Yvonne. A deathly silence fell over the room. Edward stood up again, this time with evident fury. "What is the meaning of this? This woman is forbidden from approaching my son. There's a restraining order. The order has been temporarily suspended by court decision, the judge explained, and Mrs. Yvonne Silva has been officially acquitted of the theft charge based on new evidence. Matthew walked with hesitant but determined steps. His eyes avoided Edward, focusing on the judge. When he reached the front of the room, Rachel gently led him to the witness chair. "Are you Matthew Vascott?" the judge asked in a gentle voice. The boy took a deep breath. When he spoke, his voice was low, a little hoarse from lack of use, but perfectly clear. "Yes, sir." A murmur of astonishment swept through the room. Flashes fired. Edward sank into his chair, his face a mask of horror. "Matthew," the judge continued, "do you understand that you are in a courtroom and must tell only the truth?" "I understand, sir. Mrs. Yvonne always taught me that lying is wrong." "Very well. Can you tell us what happened at your father's house? What was your routine like?" Matthew looked briefly at Yvonne, who nodded encouragingly. Then, with an increasingly firm voice, he began to narrate his story. The years of forced silence, the constant fear, the darkness that seemed endless. But he also spoke of hope, of Yvonne, of how a single act of courage can change everything. "When Mrs. Yvonne left, I stopped taking the medicine. I started to hear better, to think better. I realized I could speak, that I always could, but the medicine wouldn't let me. And the document your father accused Mrs. Yvonne of stealing, I was the one who took it. It was in the hallway, fallen from his pocket. I hid it in my teddy bear." Edward stood up violently. "He's being manipulated. It's obvious that this housekeeper trained him to say these things. My son has a serious condition, documented by dozens of doctors over the years. Doctors paid by you, isn't that right?" Rachel retorted, relentless. "We have here," she continued, holding up a recording device, "conversations recorded by Matthew himself, where you and Dr. Claire Meadows openly discuss the fraudulent scheme." The judge authorized the playback of the recordings. Edward's voice filled the room. "Matthew never spoke, never will. The medication ensures that, and now we just need to forge a new report to present to the court." The silence that followed was dense, charged with horror and indignation. Edward, realizing the gravity of the situation, made one last desperate attempt. "Your Honor, I can explain. These recordings are out of context. My son truly needs treatment, but the bureaucratic system—" "Enough," the judge interrupted, his grave voice echoing through the room. "Mr. Vascott, in light of the evidence presented, I order the immediate suspension of your custody over Matthew Vascott. The boy will be placed in temporary state custody under the care of the designated social worker. Furthermore, I order your preventive arrest for the crimes of child abuse, falsification of medical documents, procedural fraud, and attempted embezzlement." The police officers present in the room approached Edward. He looked around like a cornered animal, searching for an exit that didn't exist. "Matthew," he called in desperation, "son, you don't understand. Everything I did was for your own good." The boy, who until then had avoided looking directly at his father, finally faced him. His voice, though childlike, carried surprising dignity. "No, father, it was for your own good, never for mine." As Edward was led out, Matthew got down from the witness chair and ran into Yvonne's arms. She embraced him with tears in her eyes, holding him as if she would never let him go. "It's over, my angel," she whispered in his ear. "You are free now." And for the first time in his life, Matthew Vascott cried openly, without fear, without shame, tears of relief, of hope, of a future finally possible. A year had passed since the trial that changed everything. Yvonne's small house in the Rosewood neighborhood in Charleston overflowed with life on that sunny Sunday morning. The aroma of freshly baked corn cake mingled with the smell of fresh coffee, creating a welcoming atmosphere that contrasted sharply with the dark years in the Vascott mansion. On the back porch, Matthew, now 11 years old, sat at the rustic wooden table, concentrating on his exercise book. His face had gained color, his eyes shone with a vibrancy that had once seemed impossible. Occasionally he looked up to watch the birds visiting the small garden, smiling to himself before returning to his task. "I can't believe you're studying on a Sunday morning," exclaimed Yvonne, coming out of the kitchen with a tray. "It's almost as if school doesn't give you enough homework during the week." Matthew smiled, closing his notebook. "It's because I have a math test tomorrow. I want to get a perfect score again." "My genius," Yvonne teased, affectionately ruffling the boy's hair as she placed the tray on the table. But now it's time for breakfast. I made your favorite cake. The past 12 months had been a period of profound transformations for both. After the trial, the custody process moved with surprising speed. With the decisive support of Teresa and Rachel Cavendish, Yvonne officially became Matthew's legal guardian. The trust fund left by Helen Vascott, finally released for its true purpose, ensured that the boy had access to quality education and the psychological treatments necessary for his recovery. Edward Vascott was sentenced to 12 years in prison for the multiple crimes committed. Dr. Meadows and others involved in the scheme also faced criminal proceedings. The businessman's mansion and assets had been sold to pay compensation and cover debts with the law. "Mrs. Yvonne?" Matthew called, interrupting her thoughts. "Do you think my mom would be proud of me?" Yvonne felt a pang in her chest. It was rare for the boy to talk about Helen, the mother he had never known. During the process, they had discovered that, contrary to the story told by Edward, Helen had not died in childbirth. She had passed away a few months later, under suspicious circumstances that were still being investigated. "I'm absolutely sure, my angel," she replied, holding the boy's hand. "Your mother left that fund to ensure your well-being, your education, your future. She loved you very much, and she would be immensely proud to see how strong, intelligent, and brave you are." Matthew nodded, seeming satisfied with the answer. "And my father, did he always hate me?" Yvonne sighed. These difficult questions arose occasionally, and she always tried to be honest yet gentle. "I don't think he hated you, Matthew. I think your father is a man who can only love himself. The problem was with him, never with you." Before the boy could respond, the sound of the doorbell interrupted the conversation. Yvonne went to answer, returning minutes later accompanied by Teresa, who carried a cake and a folder of documents. "Good morning, champ," Teresa greeted, hugging Matthew. "Ready for the big day tomorrow?" "I'm a little nervous," the boy admitted. "I've never spoken in front of so many people before." "You'll do wonderfully," Teresa assured him, sitting at the table. "After all, no one knows this story better than you." The next day would be the inauguration of the Matthew Vascott Institute, a shelter and protection center for child victims of abuse and neglect. The idea had come from Matthew himself, who decided to use part of the fund left by his mother to help other children in vulnerable situations. "I brought the revised speech," Teresa said, taking some papers from the folder. "We made the changes you requested." Matthew took the paper, scanning it with his eyes. His academic progress in the last year had been extraordinary. From a child who could barely communicate, he had transformed into a diligent student, eager for knowledge, determined to make up for lost time. "It's perfect," he declared, smiling. "Thank you." The rest of the morning passed peacefully. Teresa stayed for lunch, bringing news about the progress of the investigations against the doctors who had collaborated with Edward over the years. Most faced proceedings before the medical board, in addition to criminal charges. In the afternoon, Rachel Cavendish also appeared for a quick visit. The district attorney, who had become a close family friend, brought a special gift for Matthew, the official result of the process that changed his surname. "As of today," she announced with a smile, "you are officially Matthew Silver, if you wish." The boy's eyes filled with tears. Adopting Yvonne's surname had been his idea, a way to definitively cut ties with the dark past and honor the woman who had always been his true family. "It's the best gift I could receive," he said, hugging Rachel and then Yvonne, who was also crying emotionally. The next morning, the Charleston Convention Center was packed. Authorities, the press, representatives of child protection organizations, and ordinary citizens had gathered for the Institute's inauguration. Matthew's story had gained national repercussion, raising awareness across the country and triggering a series of investigations into other institutions suspected of child abuse. Backstage, Matthew nervously adjusted his suit tie. Beside him, Yvonne watched him with undisguised pride. "Remember," she said softly, "it doesn't matter how many people are out there. Speak from the heart like when we talk at home." The boy nodded, taking a deep breath to calm himself. An assistant appeared, informing him it was time. With a final hug to Yvonne, Matthew headed to the stage. The silence was immediate when he stood before the microphone. Under the spotlights, he seemed even smaller, more fragile. But when he began to speak, his voice echoed clear and firm through the auditorium. "Good morning, everyone. My name is Matthew Silver. A year ago, I couldn't even say that." He paused, observing the attentive audience. Then, with growing confidence, he narrated his story. He spoke of the years of forced silence, of constant fear, of the darkness that seemed endless. But he also spoke of hope, of Yvonne, of how a single act of courage can change everything. "The institute we are inaugurating today is not about me," he explained. "It is about all the children whose voices have been silenced. Children who at this very moment are trapped in situations they cannot escape alone. We need to hear them, even when they cannot speak. We need to see them, even when they are hidden. We need to protect them, because every child deserves the chance to simply be a child." His final words were met with a standing ovation. Flashes fired, capturing the moment for posterity. In the corner of the stage, Yvonne cried silently, overflowing with pride. The Matthew Silver Institute quickly became a national benchmark. In addition to sheltering child victims of abuse, it offered specialized training for health, education, and social assistance professionals, helping them identify signs of abuse and neglect. An anonymous reporting system was implemented, and awareness campaigns reached the most remote parts of the country. 5 years later, a team from the largest television network in the United States visited the Institute for a special report. Matthew, now 16, received the journalists in his office. Tall, with a confident demeanor and serene eyes, he bore little resemblance to the fragile boy of yesteryear. "How do you feel looking back?" the reporter asked. "Is there any anger, any resentment?" Matthew reflected for a moment before answering. "There was a time when anger consumed me. It was like a fire burning inside me. But I learned that living with anger is like taking that medicine again. It keeps you trapped, it prevents you from moving forward." "And your father? Do you have any contact?" "No," he replied simply. "Some bonds cannot be repaired. I've learned to accept that and move on." "What would you say to other children who might be going through similar situations?" Matthew smiled slightly, leaning forward. "I would say that silence is not your destiny, that there's a whole world waiting to hear your voice. That, however dark the night may seem, dawn always comes, and when it comes you realize you are much stronger than you imagined." The camera followed him as he walked through the institute, showing the different areas: therapy rooms decorated with colorful drawings, a cozy library, a garden where children played under the watchful eyes of caregivers. In every space there was life, movement, voices. In the central courtyard, a modern sculpture represented a child with arms raised to the sky, as if celebrating freedom. At its base, a plaque read, "So that no voice is silenced, so that no story remains untold." At the end of the day, when all the journalists had left, Matthew found Yvonne waiting for him at the entrance. At 73, she still had the same sweet gaze and the same determination as ever. Despite offers of a larger house, she preferred to remain in the small residence in Rosewood, where she had raised Matthew in the years following the trial. "How was it?" she asked as they walked together to the car. "Good," he replied, taking the hand of the woman he considered his true mother. "I spoke about the Institute, about our future projects, and about him." Matthew sighed, a little. "It's not so hard anymore." Yvonne nodded, understanding. "Did you know I received a letter from him? It arrived last week. What did it say?" "Tells me that he's sorry, that he understands now the harm he caused, that he'd like to see you when you're ready." Matthew was silent for some time, processing the information. Finally, he said, "Maybe one day. Not now." "There's no rush," Yvonne assured him. "Some things need time." That night in his house, Matthew opened his desk drawer and took out the old teddy bear, now mended and faded with time. It was the only object he had brought from the Vascott mansion, a tangible reminder of a time that seemed increasingly distant. He looked out the window, at the lights of Charleston that dotted the night like earthly stars. His journey had been long, and it was still far from over. But the silence that had once imprisoned him was now just a memory. In its place, a voice rose, clear, strong, determined. A voice that told his story not as a tragedy, but as a testament to resilience. A voice that others could hear, and in which they could find courage to break their own silences. A voice that finally was truly his. Matthew Silver's story inspired significant changes in child protection legislation in the United States. The Matthew Silver Act, as it became known, established stricter protocols for monitoring children with alleged disabilities, requiring independent and periodic evaluations by multidisciplinary teams. The institute expanded to other cities across the country, bringing hope to places where despair once reigned. And in each new unit inaugurated, a small plaque reminded all visitors of the phrase Matthew had uttered in that courtroom. Years ago, when he finally found his voice, they tried to silence me, but no one can silence the truth. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Matthew and Mrs. Yvonne's story touched your hearts. To continue this journey of emotions, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about overcoming adversity and truth. Find it here by clicking on the left. If this narrative resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the transformative power of truth. Share in the comments which moment of this story moved you the most. We look forward to reading your impressions.